Captain Jake Morrison felt the cold metal floor against his face before he opened his eyes. His body hurt in ways he had forgotten were possible. The taste of metal filled his mouth, and his lungs burned with each breath. The stasis chamber hissed as it released the last of its protective gases. He pushed himself up slowly, his muscles weak after centuries of sleep. The room around him was dark, except for red emergency lights that blinked in steady patterns. Warning sounds filled the air, loud and urgent. Something was very wrong. Morrison stumbled to the nearest control panel. His fingers moved slowly over the buttons, muscle memory taking over where his foggy mind could not. The screen lit up with data that made his blood run cold. The date showed 2387. He had been asleep for 312 years. But that was not the worst part. The sun readings made no sense. Sool, their bright yellow star, was dimming. The energy output had dropped by 15% in just the last week. Stars did not behave this way. Stars did not just decide to grow dim. Across the facility, other stasis chambers began to open. Dr. Lisa Chang was the first to join him, her dark hair still damp from the stasis fluid. She moved to her workstation without a word, her scientist, mind already focused on the crisis at hand. "Jake, look at this," she said, her voice rough from the long sleep. "It's not just our sun. I'm reading similar drops in energy from dozens of star systems across the galaxy." Commander Alex Rivera emerged from his chamber, immediately alert despite the centuries of sleep. His military training kicked in as he assessed their situation. "What's our status? Why were we awakened?" Morrison pointed to the main display screen. Emergency protocols activated when Sol started dimming. The automated systems brought us out of stasis when they detected a threat to Earth's survival. Professor Helen Brooks joined them, moving slowly, but with purpose. She had been the one to help design the long sleep protocol, back when humanity first agreed to the quarantine. Her eyes went wide as she read the data streaming across the screens. "This should not be happening," she whispered. "The Galactic Preservation Council promised to watch over us. They said we would be safe in the quarantine zone." Rivera pulled up the communication systems, searching for any signals from the galaxy beyond their solar system. What he found was not the usual chatter of interstellar commerce and diplomacy. Instead, he heard only emergency broadcasts, distress signals, and something else. Silence. Vast stretches of space that had once been filled with the voices of hundreds of alien species were now quiet. "Professor, remind me why they put us to sleep in the first place," Morrison said as he studied the star charts. More red dots appeared on the display, marking systems that had gone completely dark. Brooks sat heavily in a chair, the weight of centuries pressing down on her. "We scared them, Jake. Humanity had spread to 12 systems in just 50 years. Our military technology was advancing faster than they could understand. When we developed weapons that could crack planets and bend space itself, they decided we were too dangerous to remain active." "They were afraid of us," Chang said, understanding dawning in her voice. "So they convinced us to go into stasis until we could learn to be more peaceful." "But they kept us as an option," Rivera added, his tactical mind seeing the bigger picture. "They put us to sleep, but they did not destroy us. Why keep the weapons if you never plan to use them?" Morrison activated the long-range sensors, pushing their reach as far as possible into the galaxy beyond. What he saw made his heart sink. Entire sectors of space were going dark. Not just individual stars, but whole clusters of systems. Billions of lives were winking out of existence. The communication panel crackled to life with an ancient signal, weak and distorted by distance and time. A voice spoke in heavily accented English, the words barely understandable through the static. "If you receive this message, humanity, forgive us. We were wrong to keep you sleeping. The enemy cannot be stopped by peaceful means. We need the monsters we created. We need you now." The signal cut off, leaving them in stunned silence. Chang's hands moved over her instruments, confirming what they all feared. The signal had come from the direction of the galactic core, from where the Galactic Preservation Council had their headquarters. If that region was under threat, then nowhere in the galaxy was safe. Morrison felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders, the same feeling he had carried during humanity's expansion wars centuries ago. The galaxy had called them monsters and put them to sleep to keep everyone safe. Now that same galaxy was begging for their help. "How many of us are still in stasis?" he asked. Rivera checked the facility records. "This base has 50,000 personnel. There are 12 other bases throughout the solar system. Total human population in stasis is approximately 800 million. Wake them all," Morrison ordered. "Every soldier, every scientist, every engineer. If the galaxy needs monsters, then monsters they will get." Chang looked up from her readings, fear and excitement mixing in her expression. "Jake, you need to see this. I'm detecting massive artificial structures in the dark zones. They're bigger than space stations, bigger than anything we ever built, and they're moving toward inhabited systems." Brooks pulled up historical records, her fingers flying over the ancient database. "There are legends, old stories from before the galactic civilization, tales of entities that fed on starlight itself. Most species thought they were myths." "Myths don't drain suns," Rivera said grimly. "Whatever these things are, they're real, and they're killing entire star systems." Morrison walked to the main viewport and looked out at their own sun. Even now, he could see it was dimmer than it should be. The familiar yellow light had taken on a sickly pale color. Earth had maybe weeks before the cold began to set in. "Send the wake-up signals to all bases," he commanded. "Priority awakening for all military personnel and essential scientists. We need to know what we're fighting before we can figure out how to kill it." As alarms began to sound throughout the facility, marking the beginning of humanity's greatest awakening, Morrison allowed himself one moment of doubt. The galaxy had feared them enough to lock them away for 3 centuries. Now they were being asked to become everything their enemies had nightmares about. But as he watched another star go dark on the display screen, he realized they might not have a choice. Sometimes monsters were exactly what the universe needed. General Roy Parker woke to the sound of battle stations. His 300-year sleep ended the same way his last day had begun, with humanity preparing for war. The difference was that now, they were not fighting other humans. They were fighting for the survival of everything that lived. Parker pulled himself from his stasis pod and immediately began issuing orders. Across the solar system, 800 million humans were waking up to a galaxy that had forgotten them and now desperately needed them back. Ambassador Kate Sullivan found herself in the diplomatic wing of Luna Base, surrounded by communication equipment that had been silent for centuries. Her job had been to negotiate humanity's isolation. Now she would have to negotiate their return to a galaxy at war. "General, we're receiving thousands of signals," she reported as Parker entered the command center. "Most are automated distress calls, but some are from surviving government ships. The Galactic Preservation Council is gone. Their homeworld went dark 6 months ago." Dr. Ben Carter, the astrophysicist, looked up from his instruments with grim news. "The stellar drain pattern is accelerating. Whatever is doing this has learned to consume stars faster. The early systems took weeks to die. Now they're being drained in days." Parker studied the galactic map, noting how the dead zones were spreading. "Do we have any idea what we're fighting?" "Not yet," Carter replied. "But I'm detecting massive gravitational signatures in the dead systems. Something huge is moving through those regions." Lieutenant Nina Walsh, young and eager despite the centuries of sleep, approached the command group. "Sir, we've made contact with survivors from the Zilani homeworld. They're requesting immediate assistance." Parker remembered the Zilani. They had been humanity's first alien contact, crystalline beings with technology that seemed like magic. They had also been the first to vote for humanity's isolation after witnessing human weapons in action. "Put them through," Sullivan said, activating the communications array. The hologram that appeared showed a Zilani commander, his crystal body flickering with distress patterns. When he saw humans on the screen, relief flooded through his form. "Humans," the Zilani said, his translated voice filled with hope. "You have awakened. We feared you might sleep forever." "Commander Velka," Sullivan recognized him from the old diplomatic files. What happened to the galaxy? What happened to the Council? The Zilani's form darkened. We were fools. We thought peace would last forever. We dismantled our weapons, converted our warships to exploration vessels. When the void touched came, we had nothing to fight them with. Void touched? Parker leaned forward. Entities from the space between realities. They consume the energy of stars to fuel their expansion into our dimension. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be stopped by conventional weapons. They exist only to consume. Carter pulled up his readings. How long have they been attacking? 2 years since the first star went dark. At first we thought it was a natural phenomenon. By the time we understood the truth, they had already taken 50 systems. Our fleets were destroyed in the first encounters. Our weapons passed right through them. Walsh looked at the data streaming in from across the galaxy. Sir, I'm reading evacuation fleets from over 200 systems. Billions of beings are fleeing toward the galactic rim. The Zilani commander's crystal body pulsed with shame. We remember why we made you sleep, humans. Your weapons, your willingness to destroy anything to win. We called you monsters and locked you away because we feared what you might become. And now? Parker asked quietly. Now we understand that sometimes the galaxy needs monsters. Sullivan pulled up the old treaty files, documents that had not been accessed in 3 centuries. The isolation agreement stated that humanity would remain in stasis until we learned to be more peaceful. What changed? Velka's form brightened slightly. You want to know the truth? Nothing changed. You are still the same species that frightened us centuries ago. You still build weapons that can crack worlds. You still fight wars with a brutality that makes other species sick. But now we face something worse than you ever were. Parker activated the fleet status displays. Ships that had been mothballed for centuries were coming online, their weapon systems charging for the first time in 300 years. How many ships do we have operational? 5,000 vessels of various classes, reported Captain Josh Miller as he entered the command center. Most are in good condition. The maintenance systems did their job. And weapons? Miller's expression grew dark. Everything we had when we went to sleep, plus the experimental systems that were sealed away. Planet crackers, space-time disruptors, antimatter bombs large enough to sterilize solar systems. The Zilani commander noticed their discussion. Those weapons, the ones that made us fear you, do they still function? We'll find out, Parker replied. But first we need to see what we're fighting. Captain Amy Rodriguez, humanity's best pilot, volunteered to lead the first reconnaissance mission beyond the quarantine barrier. Her ship, the Earthsci, was equipped with the most advanced sensors humanity had ever built. General, I'm detecting the edge of a dead zone 40 light-years from here, Rodriguez reported as her ship crossed into previously forbidden space. The gravitational readings are off the charts. Through the ship's cameras, they could see where a star had once burned bright. Now there was only empty space, cold and dark, but it was not truly empty. Something vast moved in the darkness, a structure so large it dwarfed entire planets. What am I looking at? Rodriguez whispered. Carter analyzed the data flowing in from her ship. It appears to be some kind of harvesting construct. Look at those energy readings. It's still processing stellar matter, converting it into something else. As they watched, the massive structure began to move. It turned toward Rodriguez's ship with purpose, as if it had detected their presence. Get out of there, Parker ordered, but Rodriguez was already firing her engines. Too late, she replied. It's launching something. Smaller constructs, each one the size of a battleship, emerged from the larger structure. They moved in ways that defied physics, appearing to skip through space rather than travel through it. Rodriguez pushed her ship to its limits, but the pursuing constructs were faster. Just as they were about to overtake her, she crossed back into the quarantine barrier. The constructs stopped at the barrier's edge as if they could not or would not cross. They're afraid of our space, Carter realized. The quarantine barrier is keeping them out. Sullivan studied the readings. The barrier was designed to keep us in, but it seems to work both ways. Whatever technology the Council used, it creates a boundary these things won't cross. Parker saw the tactical situation immediately. They've consumed most of the galaxy, but they can't touch us here. We're in the only safe zone left. For now, the Zilani commander interjected, but they are learning. Each system they take makes them stronger. Eventually they will find a way through any barrier. Nina Walsh looked at the tactical displays, her young mind grasping something the others had missed. Sir, if we're the only ones they can't reach and we have the only weapons that might hurt them, then we're not just humanity's last hope. We're the galaxy's last hope, Parker finished. The monsters that everyone feared might be the only thing that can save them. Rodriguez's ship docked with Luna Base, and she immediately reported to the command center. General, there's something else. When those constructs were chasing me, I felt something. Like they were trying to get inside my head, make me give up, make me despair. But it didn't work. Psychological warfare, Miller realized. They break their enemy's will to fight before they attack. But it bounced right off you, Carter noted. Why? Rodriguez shrugged. Maybe because I'm human. Maybe because I've been through worse things than some cosmic horror story. The Zilani commander's crystal form pulsed with understanding. That is why we need you. Other species, when they encounter these entities, they are paralyzed by existential dread. But humans, you get angry instead. Parker looked around at his officers, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had carried humanity across the stars centuries ago. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had already conquered most of the known galaxy. They were exactly where they belonged. Admiral Tony Marshall stood on the bridge of the newly awakened battleship Earth's Revenge, watching as his fleet prepared for humanity's first major operation in over 3 centuries. Around him, officers who had been sleeping since before most alien species had developed spaceflight worked with deadly efficiency. Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting movement in the Kepler sector, reported Captain Josh Miller from the tactical station. 3 void-touched harvesting structures are approaching inhabited systems. Dr. Ellen Price looked up from her research station, her face pale from days of studying the enemy. Admiral, I need to show you what we're really fighting. The main screen displayed her findings, images captured by reconnaissance drones that had been sent into dead systems. What they showed defied understanding. The void-touched constructs were not built by any conventional means. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. They feed on stellar energy, Price explained, but not in any way our physics can explain. They're draining the fundamental forces that hold atoms together, converting matter itself into energy they can use. Captain Luke Harrison, leader of the Special Operations Team, studied the tactical data. How do we fight something that exists in multiple dimensions? We heard it, Marshall replied grimly. Morrison's preliminary attacks proved our weapons can damage them. The question is whether we can damage them enough. The fleet moved toward the contested system, 18 battleships and 40 smaller vessels carrying weapons that had been sealed away for good reason. Planet crackers, space-time disruptors, and antimatter warheads that could turn moons into cosmic dust. As they approached the system's edge, the scale of their enemy became clear. The void-touched harvesting structure was larger than anything humanity had ever built. It wrapped around the dying star like a mechanical shell, drawing energy from the nuclear fires within. All ships, this is Marshall, the Admiral broadcast to his fleet. You all know why we're here. These things have killed billions of innocent people. They're trying to kill our sun. Today, we show them that humanity does not go quietly. They cure. Battle began when the harvesting structure detected their approach. Smaller constructs, each the size of a cruiser, poured out of the main body. They moved in impossible ways, appearing to teleport short distances and phase through solid matter. Fire all weapons, Marshall ordered. The human fleet unleashed hell. Antimatter torpedoes streaked through space, their warheads designed to crack the hulls of planet-sized targets. Energy cannons that could melt through asteroid belts focused their fire on the smaller constructs. The conventional weapons passed harmlessly through most of the enemy ships, just as the galactic fleets had discovered. But the exotic weapons, The ones that bent space and time began to take effect. Direct hit on the lead construct, Miller reported. The space-time disruptor is tearing holes in its hull. Dr. Price watched the readings with fascination. The dimensional disruption is forcing them to exist fully in our reality. Once they're locked into normal space, conventional weapons can hurt them. One by one, the smaller constructs fell to humanity's weapons. But the main harvesting structure was too large, too well protected. It began to move toward the human fleet, massive energy beams lashing out from its surface. The battleship New Tokyo took a direct hit and simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, not even debris remaining. It's not destroying our ships, Price realized with horror. It's unmaking them, breaking down the atomic bonds that hold them together. Marshall watched as 2 more ships vanished under the enemy's fire. This was exactly the kind of battle that had made other species fear humanity. A fight where victory required total commitment, where survival meant being willing to use any weapon, no matter how terrible. All ships, implement the Marshall Protocol, he ordered. Every human in the fleet knew what that meant. The Marshall Protocol was the last resort, the tactic that other species had nightmares about. It meant turning their own ships into weapons, using their reactors as massive bombs. "Admiral, that will kill everyone on those ships," Harrison protested. "Better than letting this thing reach inhabited systems," Marshall replied. "Captain Rodriguez, take your squadron and ram that structure. Set your reactors to overload on impact." Captain Amy Rodriguez, who had survived the first encounter with the void touched, did not hesitate. "Understood, Admiral. It's been an honor." 6 ships broke from the main formation and accelerated toward the massive harvesting structure. As they approached, their crews set the reactors to critical overload. The explosions that followed were visible from several star systems away. When the light faded, the harvesting structure was damaged, but not destroyed. However, its energy, beams had stopped firing, and it was no longer draining the star. "We heard it," Miller reported. "Energy output down 60%, it's trying to retreat." "No," Marshall said firmly. "We don't let it escape to heal and come back stronger. All remaining ships, target the damaged sections. Everything we have." The human fleet poured every weapon they possessed into the wounded enemy. Planet crackers tore through its hull. Antimatter warheads detonated inside its superstructure. Space-time disruptors opened holes in reality itself, letting the vacuum of space tear at the entity's core. Finally, with a sound like reality tearing, the harvesting structure died. Its massive form broke apart, the pieces fading away as they lost their grip on normal space-time. "System secured," Marshall reported to Earth Command. "The star is stabilizing, energy output returning to normal, but the victory had cost them. 15 ships destroyed, 8,000 human lives lost. It was the kind of casualty rate that would have horrified any other species. For humanity, it was just another day at war." Dr. Price studied the data from the battle, trying to understand what they had learned. "Admiral, I'm detecting something." The dying structure sent out a signal before it was destroyed. It was communicating with others. "How many others?" Marshall asked. Price's face went white as she studied the sensor readings. Hundreds, maybe thousands. This was just one harvesting unit. There's an entire fleet of these things moving through the galaxy. Marshall looked at the tactical display, seeing the true scope of their enemy for the first time. They had won one battle, but the war was just beginning, and every victory would cost them ships, lives, and a little more of their humanity. "Send word to Earth Command," he ordered. "We need everything. Every ship, every weapon, every person capable of fighting. The galaxy is depending on us now." Harrison studied the wreckage of the destroyed harvesting structure. "Sir, there's something else. Look at the construction patterns, the technology. This isn't random alien tech. These things were built by someone, designed by an intelligence." "You're saying there's something controlling them?" Marshall asked. "I'm saying there's something building them. And if it's been doing this for long enough to consume half the galaxy, it's had time to build an army we can't even imagine." Marshall nodded grimly. They had proven that humanity's weapons could hurt the void touched, But they had also learned that their enemy was far larger than anyone had imagined. The battle for this system was just the beginning. As the human fleet began rescue operations, for the surviving alien inhabitants, Marshall sent his report back to Earth Command. They had won their first real victory against the Void Touched, but the cost had been terrible. And there were hundreds more battles ahead. The galaxy had awakened humanity because they needed monsters. Now they would learn just how monstrous humans could be when everything they cared about was at stake. Colonel Dan Foster stood in the weapons laboratory deep beneath Luna Base, surrounded by devices that had been deemed too dangerous to use even during humanity's most desperate wars. Now, facing the extinction of all life in the galaxy, those same weapons were being prepared for battle. The dimensional bombs are ready, Foster reported to the command staff. Each one can tear a hole in space-time large enough to swallow a moon. The problem is controlling the blast radius. General Parker examined the weapon specifications with the eye of someone who had spent centuries thinking about warfare. What's the collateral damage? Complete sterilization of everything within 10 light-years of the detonation point, Foster replied matter-of-factly. Any planets, space stations, or ships in that radius will be reduced to their component atoms. Ambassador, Sullivan looked horrified. We can't use weapons like that near inhabited systems. The cure would be worse than the disease. The disease is the complete end of all life in the galaxy, Parker replied. These weapons are our best chance of stopping the Void Touched before they reach the galactic core. Captain Amy Rodriguez had returned from her latest mission with disturbing news. Her fighter squadron had conducted deep reconnaissance into Void Touched territory, using new stealth technology that made their ships nearly invisible. General, the enemy is adapting, she reported. They're building larger harvesting structures, and they're protecting them with defensive networks. The constructs we fought last month would be considered scout ships compared to what they're building now. Dr. Carl Thompson, the military researcher, presented his latest findings to the assembled officers. We've learned more about their nature from captured fragments. The Void Touched exist primarily in what we're calling entropy space, a dimension where the fundamental forces work differently. They're not truly alive in any sense we understand. Then what are they? Asked Captain Josh Miller. They're more like antibodies, Thompson explained. Cosmic immune responses designed to eliminate what they see as an infection, and that infection is life itself. Admiral Marshall activated the Galactic Tactical Display, showing the current state of the war. Red zones marked systems that had been completely consumed. Yellow zones showed systems under attack. The small green areas represented the few remaining safe zones where galactic civilization still survived. We've managed to slow their advance, Marshall reported, but we haven't stopped it. Every victory costs us ships we can't replace and lives we can't afford to lose. The human fleet had grown to include captured alien vessels, modified with human weapons and crewed by the few alien survivors who were willing to fight alongside humanity. But it was not enough. The Void Touched seemed to have unlimited resources, able to replace their losses faster than humanity could destroy them. We need a new strategy, Parker concluded, something that uses our advantages while minimizing our weaknesses. Lieutenant Nina Walsh, now promoted to captain after her actions in the Vega system, presented her analysis of recent battles. Sir, we've noticed a pattern. The Void-Touched harvesting structures always move toward systems with the highest concentrations of life. They seem drawn to populated worlds. They feed on life energy as much as stellar energy, Thompson agreed. The more complex the life forms, the more energy they can extract. Foster saw the tactical opportunity immediately. Then we use that against them. We make them come to us on ground of our choosing. The plan that emerged was both brilliant and horrifying. Humanity would establish a series of fortress worlds in key systems, heavily populated with volunteers who were willing to serve as bait. When the Void Touched came to feed, they would find heavily defended systems equipped with humanity's most destructive weapons. You're talking about using entire populations as bait, Sullivan protested. Billions of lives at risk. Billions of lives already at risk, Parker replied. At least this way they have a chance to fight back. The first fortress world was established in the Centauri system, just 4 light-years from Earth. Millions of humans and alien refugees volunteered to relocate there, knowing they would be the first target when the enemy arrived. Colonel Foster personally oversaw the installation of the defensive systems. Planet-based antimatter cannons that could crack moons, orbital platforms equipped with space-time disruptors, and deep beneath the planet's surface, the dimensional bombs that could destroy everything within 10 light years. If the conventional defenses fail, Foster explained to the Planetary Defense Force, we detonate the dimensional charges. Everything in this system dies, but we take a significant portion of their fleet with us. Captain Rodriguez led the fighter squadrons that would provide the first line of defense. Her pilots had trained in combat techniques that would have been considered war crimes by the old galactic standards. Ramming attacks, suicide runs, and the use of their own ships as guided missiles. Remember, she told her pilots, we're not trying to win clean, we're trying to win it all. Every void-touched construct you destroy is one less threat to the inhabited systems behind us. When the enemy finally arrived at Centauri, they came in force. 3 massive harvesting structures, each one larger than the previous generation, accompanied by thousands of smaller constructs. They had learned from their previous defeats and adapted their tactics accordingly. The battle began in the outer system, with human fighter squadrons engaging the void-touched scouts. Rodriguez led her squadron in a series of hit-and-run attacks, using the new dimensional torpedoes that could force the enemy constructs into normal space where they could be damaged. All squadrons, focus fire on the lead harvester, Rodriguez ordered. We need to take out their command structure before they can coordinate their attack. The human fighters swarmed around the massive enemy structure like angry insects, their weapons tearing at its hull. But the void-touched had learned as well. The harvesting structure was protected by energy fields that could deflect most attacks, and its defensive weapons were more accurate than before. Squadron after squadron was destroyed, but each attack damaged the enemy further. Human pilots, knowing they were already dead, turned their failing ships into guided missiles, ramming their targets with engines set to overload. On the planet's surface, Foster watched the battle through tactical displays. The enemy was taking losses, but so were the defenders. At the current rate of attrition, the void-touched would reach the planet within hours. Sir, reported Captain Miller from the orbital command station, the enemy is adapting to our weapons. They're developing countermeasures faster than we anticipated. Foster made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Detonate the dimensional charges, all of them, now. The explosion that followed could be seen from Earth, 4 light-years away. The Centauri system simply ceased to exist, taking with it the 3 massive harvesting structures and thousands of smaller constructs. But it also killed everyone on the fortress world, millions of human and alien volunteers who had chosen to make their last stand there. Admiral Marshall received the tactical reports with grim satisfaction. Casualties? Total loss of all personnel in the Centauri system, Foster reported. But we destroyed approximately 15% of the enemy's known fleet strength. Acceptable losses, Marshall concluded, though his voice carried the weight of the decision. Prepare the next fortress world. We'll need to do this at least 10 more times to significantly impact their forces. Captain Walsh looked at the strategic displays with growing understanding. Sir, this isn't just about winning battles. This is about proving to the galaxy that someone is willing to pay any price to stop these things. Exactly, Parker agreed. Other species see our tactics as monstrous because they are. But monsters are exactly what this situation requires. As news of the Centauri victory spread throughout the galaxy, reactions were mixed. Some surviving alien governments expressed horror at humanity's willingness to sacrifice entire systems. Others began to understand that this level of commitment might be the only way to win. The void, touched for their part, seemed to pause in their advance. For the first time since their invasion began, they had encountered resistance that could actually hurt them. They had learned that attacking human space came with a terrible price, but humanity had learned something as well. They could win this war, but victory would require them to become everything their enemies had feared. They would have to sacrifice entire worlds, kill billions of their own people, and use weapons that could crack reality itself. They were becoming the monsters the galaxy needed them to be. Fleet Admiral Jack Collins stood on the bridge of the massive battleship Human's Last Stand, leading the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Around him, the combined fleet of 800 vessels prepared for the final assault on the galactic core, where the void touched were attempting to consume the supermassive black hole that held the galaxy together. "Admiral, long-range sensors confirm our worst fears," reported Captain Luke Harrison from the tactical station. "They're not just trying to drain the black hole. They're trying to use its energy to tear open a permanent gateway into our dimension." Dr. Sarah Kim, the quantum physicist who had spent months studying the enemy's ultimate plan, looked up from her calculations with horror. "If they succeed, our entire galaxy will be flooded with entropy space. Every star, every planet, every living thing will be consumed within days." Collins studied the tactical display showing the enemy's final stronghold. The void touched had built a structure around the galactic core that dwarfed their previous constructs. It was larger than most solar systems, a mechanical shell that was slowly drawing energy from the black hole itself. "How long do we have?" Collins asked. "Based on current consumption rates, maybe 6 hours before they have enough energy to complete the gateway," Kim replied. "After that, it won't matter how many ships we have. Nothing will be able to stop them." The human fleet included volunteers from dozens of species, the last survivors of civilizations that had been consumed by the void touched. They had seen their homeworlds die, and their peoples scattered to the cosmic winds. Now they had one final chance for revenge. Captain Josh Miller commanded the alien auxiliary fleet, ships that had been hastily retrofitted with human weapons. "Admiral, the Zalani commander wants to speak with you." The crystalline being appeared on the main screen, his form flickering with patterns of grief and determination. "Admiral Collins, my people remember when we first met your species. We thought you were demons then, beings of pure destruction. Now we understand that sometimes demons are exactly what the universe needs." Collins nodded grimly. "Commander Velka, your people don't have to be part of this final assault. You've already lost enough." "No," the Zalani replied firmly. "We made the mistake of putting you to sleep because we feared what you might become. We will not make the mistake of abandoning you when you need allies the most." The final battle plan was simplicity itself, the kind of strategy that only humanity would have considered. They would assault the massive structure directly, using every weapon in their arsenal to punch through its defenses. When conventional weapons failed, they would detonate the dimensional bombs carried by volunteer ships, tearing holes in space-time itself. And if all else failed, they would implement the Collins Protocol, a plan so devastating that it had been classified above the level of most governments. They would use Earth-Sun itself as a weapon, draining its energy to power a dimensional disruption field large enough to seal the gateway permanently. "All ships, this is Admiral Collins," he broadcast to the combined fleet. "Today we fight, not just for humanity, but for every species that has ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. The enemy believes that life is a disease to be cured. We're here to prove them wrong." The assault began with the longest-range weapons humanity possessed. Antimatter torpedoes that could destroy planets streaked across millions of miles of space, their warheads detonating against the enemy structure's outer defenses. The void touched responded with waves of defensive constructs, each one the size of a battleship. But these were different from the enemies they had faced before. These constructs seemed more solid, more real, as if the proximity to the galactic core was allowing them to exist more fully in normal space. "That makes them vulnerable," realized Captain Harrison. "They can't phase through our attacks anymore." The human fleet pressed their advantage, using conventional weapons alongside their exotic arsenal. Planet crackers tore through enemy defensive lines. Space-time disruptors opened holes in the massive structure's hull, and human fighters, piloted by volunteers who knew they would not be coming home, carried dimensional bombs directly into the enemy's defensive networks. But the void touched had one final surprise. As the human fleet approached the core structure, reality itself began to bend around them. Space twisted in impossible ways. Time moved differently in different parts of the battlefield. Ships found themselves attacking enemies that existed 5 minutes in the past or firing at targets that would not exist for another hour. They're using the black hole's gravitational field to manipulate space-time, Dr. Kim realized. They're turning the galactic core into a weapon. Several human ships were caught in temporal loops, forced to fight the same battle over and over again. Others found themselves aging decades and minutes as time accelerated around them. The alien, auxiliary ships less experienced with humanity's exotic weapons began to suffer catastrophic losses. All ships, implement dispersal pattern Omega, Collins ordered. We can't fight them in their chosen battle space. We need to force them to come to us. The human fleet scattered throughout the galactic core region using their superior mobility to avoid the worst of the space-time distortions. They established multiple firing positions, creating a network of crossfire that forced the void touched to divide their attention. It was then that Captain Amy Rodriguez, leading the elite fighter squadrons, made the discovery that would change the battle. While conducting a reconnaissance run near the enemy structure's core, her sensors detected something unexpected. "Admiral, there's something inside that structure," she reported. "It's not void-touched technology. It's something else. Something older." Dr. Kim analyzed the sensor data and gasped. "It's a galactic core species, one of the ancient civilizations that lived near the black hole billions of years ago. The void touched didn't build that structure. They're using something that was already there." Collins saw the tactical implications immediately. If it's not their technology, then it has weaknesses they might not know about. "Rodriguez, can you get closer?" "On my way, Admiral." Rodriguez's fighter squadron penetrated deep into the enemy structure, dodging defensive fire and space-time distortions. What they found at the core was a machine of incredible age and complexity, built by a civilization that had existed long before any current species had evolved. "It's a stellar engineering platform," Rodriguez reported, "designed to manipulate black holes and control galactic structure. The void touched our parasites, using technology they don't understand." "Can we shut it down?" Collins asked. "Maybe, but someone would have to get inside and interface with the control systems directly, and that someone probably wouldn't be coming back." Collins made the decision without hesitation. "I'm going in." "Sir, you can't," protested Harrison. "The fleet needs you." "The fleet needs this mission to succeed," Collins replied. "And I'm the most expendable flag officer we have." Collins took a small assault ship directly into the heart of the enemy structure, fighting through defensive fire and reality distortions that grew worse the deeper he went. Behind him, the human fleet continued their assault, buying him time with their lives. The control chamber of the ancient machine was vast beyond imagination, filled with technologies that predated human civilization by billions of years. But the interface was intuitive, designed by beings who understood that others might need to use their creation in an emergency. As Collins worked to understand the controls, Dr. Kim's voice crackled through the communication system. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the structure. Whatever you're doing, it's working, but the void touched are trying to stop you." Collins could feel the machine responding to his commands, its ancient systems coming online after eons of dormancy. The device had been built to maintain galactic stability, to prevent exactly the kind of dimensional incursion the void touched were attempting. "All ships, get clear of the galactic core," Collins ordered. "I'm activating the dimensional seal. This is going to get rough." The ancient machine awakened fully, drawing power directly from the supermassive black hole. The dimensional gateway the void touched had been building began to collapse, their connection to entropy space severing as reality reasserted itself. The void-touched entities throughout the galaxy simply ceased to exist, their forms unable to maintain coherence without their connection to their home dimension. In systems across the galaxy, harvesting structures went silent and began to break apart. But the activation of the ancient machine came with a price. The energy required to seal the dimensional gateway permanently had to come from somewhere, and that somewhere was Earth's sun. Sol's nuclear fires guttered and died as its energy was channeled across the galaxy to power the dimensional seal. Collins watched through the machine's sensors as his home star went dark for the first time in 5 billion years. Earth would have, perhaps days before the cold set in, before the world that had given birth to humanity became uninhabitable. This is Admiral Collins to all human forces, he transmitted across the galaxy. The enemy is defeated, the dimensional gateway is sealed, but Earth's sun is dead. Begin immediate evacuation of the home system. This is not a drill. The victory was complete. The void touched were gone, sealed away in their entropy dimension with no way to return.